Behavioral theory is a theory of learning which states that all behaviors are learned through interaction with environment through a process called conditioning. Thus, behavior is simply a response to environmental stimuli. Behaviorism is only concerned with observable stimulus-response behaviors as they can be studied in a systematic and observable manner. We have four major contributors of behavioral theory. First, we have John Watson. According to Watson, behavior is a study of observable and human behaviors instead of states of consciousness which are difficult to verify. Second, we have B.F. Skinner. Skinner introduced the concept of operant conditioning, pointing out that behavior is determined by its consequences reinforcements or punishments that make the behavior more likely or less likely to repeat. Third, we have Joseph Wolpe. He developed the behavioral technique of systematic desensitization, which involved developing a hierarchy of anxiety-provoking situations and learning relaxation techniques, and then learning to associate a previously anxiety-provoking situation with relaxation. Fourth, we have Donald Malkebaum. He conceptualized self-instructional training as a means by which people could teach themselves how to deal effectively with situations that had caused problems in prior situations. In the field of psychology and psychotherapy, behavior therapy has proven to be a powerful force. Initiated in the late 1950s, behavior therapy relies on the idea of classical conditioning developed by Ivan Pavlov and B.F. Skinner research on operant conditioning. Behavior therapies were constructed from discoveries made on animals in experimental psychology and physiology laboratories. Early on, behavior therapy represented a radical minority movement in opposition to the dominant psychoanalytic school of psychotherapy, and since then it has evolved greatly. Behavior therapy is based on the principle that mental disorders are learned behaviors and eventually result with a symptom of disorder. It is a psychological model that departed from psychoanalytic and psychodynamic therapies, and it uses the scientific method in working with clients and investigating the efficacy of its approach. Behavior therapy emphasizes modifying and gaining control over unwanted behaviors. The goals of the behavior therapist emphasize modifying or eliminating the maladaptive behavior that the client manifests and on helping him or her develop healthy, constructive ways of acting. In order to begin the process of behavior therapy, problems must be identified and assessed. By asking questions, the therapist is first able to discover and comprehend the client's presenting issues.
Behavioral therapy has many strengths and benefits. It can be used on a wide variety of conditions such as depression, anxiety, obesity, and insomnia. It is highly adaptable as it is used in schools and parenting classes as well, and results come in a very short amount of time. It also puts a focus on self-esteem, and people that use behavioral therapy generally have a healthier thought pattern. There are some weaknesses when it comes to this therapy. The focus is mainly on the current problem and not on the underlying problems that may have contributed to it. This can be difficult in looking at the big picture. It also treats symptoms rather than trying to understand what caused them. This results in complex needs may be unsuitable for this type of therapy as it is highly structured. There's a lot of control and manipulation by the therapist instead of a focus on the relationship between these two. These can be detrimental. Here I'm going to go over some comparisons between the behavioral theory and the psychoanalytical theory. First, the psychoanalytical theory is often over a longer period of time, where the behavior therapy is much shorter. Behavioral therapy can be as short as a few sessions, where the psychoanalytical therapy can be over years. The psychoanalytic theory believes that in order to achieve a solution, you have to bring repressed memories to light from your past that you may not remember, whereas in behavioral therapy, you are focused on your current thought and idea, not the past. Another difference in therapies is that psychoanalytic is mostly led by the patient, whereas behavior is very structured on meeting criteria every session. Psychoanalytical is mostly unstructured. Here I'm going to compare the behavioral theory to the Gestalt theory. Behavioral theory was constricted to the behavior of a person, not the experiences, where the Gestalt theory focused on both. The Gestalt theory did not reject a person's mental and emotional processes, where the behavioral theory did reject it. Behaviorism dealt with certain problems which were only parts of the whole, while the Gestalt theory focused on the whole picture and all the moving parts. Gestalt therapy is designed to promote a client's exploration of awareness issues in his or her life rather than to modify specific client behavior.
The emphasis of behavioral therapy is on modifying and having the advantage over undesirable behaviors. Generally, individuals who pursue behavior therapy want to increase or decrease a given behavior. Behavioral therapy should focus on the client's perceptible behavior and their reaction to the behavior rather than on their unresolved trauma. Behaviorists have the liberty to blend any technique into their therapy so long as it is proven to definitely change client behavior. I will present a few of the major counseling techniques used in behavioral therapy. In relaxation training techniques, counselors teach clients ways in which to relax the muscles throughout their bodies. Tight muscles are shown to increase anxiety. Therefore, therapists teach clients to actively notice the difference in their bodies between tense muscles versus relaxed muscles, thus reducing bodily tension. Practicing this technique will provide clients a greater understanding of tension and the ways in which they can control it. Counselors create an individualized relaxation training plan in order to effectively target each client's specific areas of tension. The idea of reciprocal inhibition is based on the reticence of a response by the existence of a secondary response that conflicts with it. The learning principles of classical conditioning influence the usage of this technique. Clients are instructed to use deep breathing in conjunction with muscle relaxation techniques when faced with anxiety-provoking scenarios. Systemic desensitization is used with clients who experience a range of phobias, from an irrational fear of heights, objects, or animals. One of the main purposes is to instruct a natural relaxation response in the client when the previously feared object shows up. The idea behind this technique is that behavioral therapy states that it is impossible to be both anxious and relaxed at the same time. The primary goal of stress inoculation training is to modify an individual's views about the behaviors and remarks they make to themselves concerning how they deal with stress. This technique helps clients bring about a relaxation response, participate in cognitive reorganization, and perform competently at problem solving. Exposure therapies are designed to treat phobias along with many other behaviors. Therapists expose clients to the very situations that have contributed to their problems. The first exposure therapy is called flooding. This is the idea of a client reinforcing their avoidant behavior because of the feeling of relief they get by staying away from it. In flooding, the therapist exposes the client to a safe but maximum intensity version of the frightening stimulus. As a consequence of the high exposure, the client's anxiety reaction eventually lessens and elimination occurs after that. The second exposure therapy is called in vivo, which refers to procedures that take place in the client's physical environment versus an imagined scenario. The recommendation is for therapists to gradually expose the client to reduce their fears. During the session, if the client becomes tense, it is at the therapist's discretion to use a relaxation technique to reduce the client's anxiety. The third exposure therapy is called implosive therapy, which is similar to flooding therapy. However, it uses intensified imaginary scenes that often take from hypothetical sources of anxiety, such as hostility toward parental figures, rejection, or sex. In the following slide, we'll explore a technique in behavioral therapy used with clients called behavioral activation, often used for treating depression. In this technique, the clinicians replace a person's negative avoidant behaviors with new rewarding behaviors, increasing the person's positive reinforcement, all while reducing their negative reinforcement. The role of the clinician is to identify the client's negative behavior patterns, collaborating with them to design more positive, rewarding activities that are easy and manageable for the client to accomplish. In the example that follows, along with the active participation of the client, the clinician will develop a behavioral activation plan that specifies how and when they'll complete their positive replacement behaviors.
Hi, Jennifer. Come in, please have a seat. On a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst you've ever felt, and 10 being you at your happiest, how are you feeling today?
I barely made it out of bed today. I am ready to discuss some of the things you mentioned to me last time.
That's great that you were able to make it in. Let's begin by identifying what you would consider your negative behaviors.
Well, I have been feeling very depressed. I recently lost my job, so now I have no reason to get out of bed in the morning. My kids are teenagers and don't need me anymore. My husband has tried to help me, but seeing as nothing's changed, he's now threatening to leave me, and now I can't stop eating at night. I'm up until 3 a.m. eating, watching TV. I can't take it anymore, and I've had enough.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you lost your job, which has you feeling depressed, and because your children are independent, you're feeling like you're not needed. Your husband is unhappy and wants a divorce. I hear that you've started binge eating and staying up very late watching TV and are having trouble getting out of bed in the morning. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Which are the behaviors you'd like to replace?
Binge eating and my depression.
What activities used to make you happy that you'd want to try and do again?
I used to love going for walks, reading, swimming, writing.
That's great. So to help with your depression, what can lead to significantly positive results is if we create a plan designed to incorporate more positive and rewarding activities into your schedule. Would you feel up to collaborating with me on a work plan that you would stick to?
It's going to be difficult for me, but I do want to try.
Well, it may very well be challenging in the beginning, but I will be here to guide you. Do you have a friend who would be willing to act as your support system?
I think my husband will. I know he desperately wants to see me get back to the way I was before.
It sounds like your husband will make a positive contribution. Today we're going to develop what is called a behavioral activation plan. So we're going to make it very specific in how and when you will complete your positive replacement behaviors. You will be using a daily log to indicate how you're spending your time, and slowly you'll replace sleeping in and binge eating with those activities you mentioned enjoying, so hiking, reading, swimming, and writing. We can also explore other activities as we move along with the plan. Okay. So here's what the behavioral activation plan looks like. So it's broken down into days of the week and further each hour of the day. We're going to work together and schedule your chosen activities. So it's broken down into very manageable chunks.
That sounds okay.
Was there a day or time that would be easiest for you to manage an activity?
Later afternoons seem to be the least challenging.
Okay, so how do you feel about scheduling activity Monday and Thursday afternoons at 4 p.m. to start?
That sounds okay.
So which activity should we schedule for Monday at 4 p.m.?
Let's do reading.
Reading is a good activity to ease into. Let's be very specific with your goals. How many pages do you think you would realistically want to read at a time?
10?
10 sounds like a manageable goal. Let's go ahead and add 10 pages of reading to Monday 4 p.m. block. And so Thursday at 4 p.m., which activity would you like to schedule?
I think going for a walk.
Going for a walk is a good activity to start with as well. Where do you think you would like to walk?
Around the block?
Walking around the block is a good choice. So let's add walking around the block Thursday at 4 p.m. to your behavioral activation plan. And would your husband accompany you?
Yes, I think so.
How does hearing this plan and seeing it in writing make you feel?
I'm not feeling overwhelmed with the plan. I feel like I might be able to stick with it.
Good. At the beginning of our next meeting, we'll talk about how your behavioral activation plan is working, if anything needs to be changed, modified, or added in order to make you feel like you want to follow the plan.
Okay, thank you, Judith.
All right, Jennifer, that's a really positive start. I will see you next week.
Bye.
When considering its multicultural perspectives, behavioral theory has many strengths. It is easy customizable to fit a person's values and abilities. It focuses on a complete assessment of the client's life situation, including factors such as discrimination, economic forces, and cultural issues. It has a non-judgmental approach toward client differences as the theory emphasizes problem solving. Therapists are mindful of their client's culture as the theory highlights a collaborative approach to problem solving with the clients playing an active role in their sessions. This theory holds that the client knows themselves the best, therefore client self-determination is key. When considering its multicultural perspectives, behavioral theory has many strengths. It is easy customizable to fit a person's values and abilities. It focuses on a complete assessment of the client's life situation, including factors such as discrimination, economic forces, and cultural issues. It has a non-judgmental approach toward client differences as the theory emphasizes problem solving. Therapists are mindful of their client's culture as the theory highlights a collaborative approach to problem solving with the clients playing an active role in their sessions. This theory holds that the client knows themselves the best, therefore client self-determination is key. When considering its multicultural perspective, in continuing with the strengths of behavioral theory in regards to a multicultural perspective, behavioral theory holds a present versus a past view as the focus is on changing the behavior rather than an in-depth inquiry into client backgrounds. The focus is on changing specific client behavior rather than the client's feelings and sharing their personal concerns, which is preferred and more beneficial in certain cultures. Finally, studies show that ethnic minorities favor short-term therapy rather than extended sessions. Behavioral therapy is generally a time-limited form of therapy. However, there are some limitations to behavioral theory when considering its multicultural perspectives. Behavioral theory has a lack of attention to diversity issues, which could help explain some of the client's learned behavior. And finally, many behavior therapists are not sufficiently trained to conduct in-depth cultural assessments related to their clients' issues, which could also explain the ways in which a client's culture is influencing their hardships.